All right, to the breaking news in our world lead now. The push to secure a deal between Israel and Hamas is intensifying. The deal expected to include the release of some hostages and a ceasefire. I want to turn to CNN's MJ Lee is at the White House. We also have national security analyst David Sanger and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Evelyn Farkas with us. MJ, let me start with you. What did President Biden have to say about this just moments ago?
Yeah, this was certainly a legacy-burnishing speech where President Biden essentially tried to take a victory lap for all of his foreign policy accomplishments over the last 4 years, saying that America has been thoroughly tested over the last 4 years, but has emerged stronger and its adversaries weaker with regards to the situation in Gaza. The president echoing what U.S. officials have been saying, both in private and in public over the last 24 hours, suggesting that a deal could be reached sometime soon, that it could be on the cusp of being announced. You know, it's been a really long time, Casey, since we have heard this kind of optimism, at least coming from inside the Biden administration. But sources have been telling us over the last day or so that they do believe a deal could be announced for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of hostages from Gaza in the next coming days, meaning in the very final stretch of President Biden's time in office. This is what the president said in his speech earlier about what would be entailed as a part of this deal if it were to come to fruition.
Pressing hard to close this. The deal we have structured would free the hostages, halt the fighting, provide security to Israel, and allow us to significantly surge humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians who've suffered terribly in this war that Hamas started.
And, you know, for the president, this deal has been so elusive for so long. And I think it's important to point out just how costly this has been for the president in terms of the time and effort that he has tried to spend dealing with this. It has at times been incredibly disruptive to his ability to govern things here at home, not to mention just the political capital he has had to spend. So it goes without saying that this is very much a deal that he would like to see get done under his watch, Casey.
Right, for sure. And on that point, though, David Sanger, we have reporting here at CNN, a source in Israel saying that Donald Trump is actually the driving force behind how this is sort of coming together here at the last second. Our source said this, quote, only Trump is the incentive, only Trump. And he's talking there about Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. What impact does that dynamic have?
Well, it's been a fascinating negotiation, Casey, in part because the president's chief or president-elect's chief Mideast negotiator, Steve Witkoff, has been going along for each one of these negotiations, has been in the room with Brett McGurk, who's been the negotiator for the Biden administration. He told me last week McGurk is leading this, but clearly many of the deadlines will fall into the Trump administration if this comes together. So they want to have a tight handoff. And it's interesting because you've heard everybody, including Secretary of State Blinken, who you saw on the screen there a moment ago, talk about the role of the Trump appointees. So one way to look at this is it's the way it's supposed to happen. You saw at the press conference last week, President-elect Trump issued this threat that, you know, if there isn't a deal before he takes office, they'll be held to pay. We heard J.D. Vance later say that that would be unleashing the Israelis to go after the remainder of Hamas's leadership. But a lot of that's happening anyway. The core of the deal hasn't changed. It would be 34 of the hostages, which is probably a little under half. It would last with a ceasefire for 42 days. And then the question is, what could the Trump administration do after that point? Could they extend the ceasefire? Could they get more hostages?
Really interesting. Evelyn Farkas, how do you see the state of play here? What is holding it up at this stage?
Yeah, that is a good question. Clearly, I do think that President Trump's envoy being there on the spot does matter because he seems to have more sway, meaning he being President Trump, with Benjamin Netanyahu, with the Israeli prime minister. And obviously, he's coming into office. So Netanyahu wants to please him, and he's going to have to agree to this deal. It's hard to say which side is more difficult. The Qataris obviously have been putting pressure on Hamas. The deal itself will be important, obviously, because we want to get the Americans back. Among the hostages are 7 Americans. But we also want to make sure that there's the path ahead for peace, to put an end to this. President Trump's been pretty blunt, let's just get this over with, or language like that. So I think we also want to move back to a more stable situation. But the question is, what is that? Because there are a lot of pieces here now, Lebanon, Syria, and the West Bank situation. The whole prospect of a two-state solution is very much up in the air.
Yeah. So, Evelyn, we know that there's going to be a pretty critical meeting tomorrow as this deal making continues to unfold. What needs to happen there?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously have to come to terms. How are they going to make the prisoner swap? The names, I don't know. I would imagine that they know what the names are. Who are they swapping? And then the timing, who's going to take credit, who's going to be there to, do all the operations.